Good evening and welcome to tonight's Inventory Academy webinar. My name is Sian Hemming-Metcalf and I will be taking you through tonight's webinar. Some bit of housekeeping initially. The webinar is looked to last around about 45 minutes. You've got a viewing panel to your lower right corner so you can post questions. What I'm going to try and do is work through the webinar so that you're not delayed, because obviously I appreciate this is your evening, and that if I don't get any chance to answer your questions, then still post them and then we'll answer them once we send out the recording later on, and then make sure that all those questions are answered. So tonight's webinar, inventory clerks, employed versus self-employed. And one of the reasons that I wanted to do this webinar is that there's a lot of talk, certainly in the groups that I'm part of, around whether clerks should be looking to be just self-employed or whether they should be going employed, working for a company or another inventory company. And especially some new clerks that I've met recently, they're a bit unsure exactly which way to go. So I thought it would be a really good topic to touch on, because it's not something that has really been explained by anyone else out there in the industry as it stands at the moment. And especially if you are starting out as a new inventory clerk, or you're looking to change how your service operates, how do you take that actual first step? How do you know what employment will suit you personally, your circumstances best? So tonight we're going to be covering what to consider when starting out as an inventory clerk, some very brief definitions of employed, self-employed, what I see the advantages and disadvantages of being a self-employed clerk are, income expectations, what you can earn, not in as much as individually per region, etc., but in general. The issue of taking reports in-house, what issues to consider, what the longer term prospects in regards to career progression within the industry, and with that comes what training that you might need or could do with, and what your options are, and then where I see the future of the industry, where we'll be in 5 years' time. So that's what we're going to be discussing. As I said, do place your questions in the lower right corner of your screen in your field, and as I said, if I can't get to them during the webinar, then we'll answer them when we send out a recording of this webinar later. So if you're considering becoming an inventory clerk, if you're new to the industry, one of the most important questions you ask, or you should be asking yourself, is the role right for you? But how do you know that? So I've put some pointers out here just to kind of like get you thinking about the role itself. So we've got here, are you happy to work alone or as part of a team? Because most of the work that inventory clerks do is solo working. You're on your own in a property day in, day out. So you need to really consider that, because if you're not someone who likes being on your own and you prefer being with other people and that interaction, then you've got to consider that as a role. Are you able to use the latest mobile devices, laptops or computers? The industry is forging ahead so quickly at the moment in regards to new apps, new systems, etc. Everybody wants everything now, or yesterday, if not. So you've got to be comfortable with the technology and the apps that go with that, and sometimes, depending on your background, your knowledge base, etc., that's something that not everybody is actually comfortable with, but it is something you can learn, but you've also got to want to learn. So again, I would be asking myself, if I were you, that question. Also, do you need a set salary, or can your earnings be flexible? Certainly when you start out, I did find myself that earnings were pretty sparse initially while you're trying to set yourself up, get yourself noticed, get your foot in that door. So you need to be aware of that, and whether you can afford to maybe not earn so much initially, or whether you actually do need a set salary, especially if you're maybe coming from an employed status, looking to set up on your own. Can you be flexible with your earnings? And part of that also is about being self-motivated. It's not a job or a role that as far as I'm concerned, is something that you can just pick up and go, okay, I'll do that today, or do this today, or yeah, I'll go and do that job. You know, there's a lot of self-motivation in there, both to do a good job, to get out there and get the work, interact with other people, get reputation for yourself. So there's loads of motivation needed. And with that, you need to be well presented. You know, you're the face of your company in regards to being a sole provider or working with a part of the team. You know, people want to know that when they're doing a job for them, you're not only doing a professional job, you look professional. It gives that feeling, that confidence from the client to know that this person really does know what they're doing. So it really does help to both look well presented, as well as obviously being professional in your reports and also in how you motivate yourself. Also think about, are the agents or the company you're looking to work with are within easy travelling distance of where you live, because if you're having to travel vast distances covering a large area, you have to factor in, well, what does that cost you, both in time, money, and effort. So be aware of what that actually looks like for you. If you're in a small village and with maybe 1 or 2 agents, and then you've got to look else and out further for more work, where do you go, how long does that take you to travel there, what are the cost implications. But equally, if you work, say, in London, where there's huge amount of opportunities, but then you've got to get places, you've got to go, possibly use buses, public transport, what the cost involved, or if you drive a car, do you have to pay the congestion charge? So there's loads of things to factor in when you're setting yourself up or doing this role, so that you know where all your costs are and you know what to expect in regards to earning versus what costs are coming out. You also need to consider what you're going to look at both in the short and medium and longer term. Are you looking for freedom of choice in how and when you work? Do you want that flexibility? Or are you looking to build your business, employ multiple clerks, so you become effectively the manager and then you're managing all these clerks and working with a bigger area? Or are you just happy to be that sole provider, that one person, one man band, as some people use, and just working for yourself, doing jobs as and when you want to? So each one of those is perfectly fine. It's really down to you and what you want out of the role and what you want to get both financially and personally. But do factor that in, do think about that. Also think about the issues of working from home, or you're going to work in a co-working space, or you're going to work in an office, depending again what kind of employment status you take. So most of the time you're working in an office is because you're employed, co-working space and home, self-employed. There are costs, there are things to consider, especially if maybe you're working from home where you've got a young family, there's children around. Will you be able to work in an area where you're not going to be disturbed? Or if you're working in an office space, can you work with loads of people with loads of noise? Do you need the quiet time of maybe a co-working space or working at home? You know, where's the flexibility in that? Where do you see it and what do you want from it? One of the really important aspects of setting yourself up or working as a clerk is about the accountancy advice or HR advice as well. Certainly when I set up, I had an initial accountant, which I found actually they weren't all that good, even though they had the inverted commas required qualifications. So what I did was I actually approached a chartered accountant. She then introduced me to one of her friends who was an accountant, so I now use both. So I've got one that will do my day-to-day invoicing, bookkeeping, etc., and then I've got a chartered accountant to do my end-of-year figures and returns to HMRC, VAT, etc., so that I know everything is done right, everything is legal, everything is covered, and then I know that whatever profits we've got, whatever earnings that I'm looking to take from the business, I know are correctly worked out. I really can't stress that more, because if you get that wrong, then HMRC, VAT people, they're really not worried about you as an individual. They just want what they believe is owed. So you've got to make sure that you get that bit right, and if you do, and you get the processes in place and the various accounting options like QuickBooks, ClearBooks, Sage, etc., get them in place, then it takes a huge amount of pressure off you and your shoulders, and can then, you know, enable you to work on the business. Another key area is researching your competition. It's knowing who is in your area, where you're going to be working, who else is operating that area, what they're charging, so that you can then set a realistic pricing structure. And one of the things that I would really recommend is don't set your pricing structure to match your competitor, because your competitor might have a pricing structure that fits within everybody else, but doesn't necessarily reflect how well you do the job. So if you are going to offer very detailed, very high-end quality reports, then if you're basing your pricing structure on someone who maybe is doing good reports, but they're not as detailed, not as robust, not as high-end, then why would you want to charge the same? You should be aiming your sites higher, but you need to know what that looks like. So you need to research your competition, you need to research what your agents are paying, what they're willing to pay, and also push them on, you know, offering them a quality service, maybe more than what their current provision are providing. Yes, it might be a bit more, but then you're giving them more. So think about your competition, set your price structure to a realistic amount so that it reflects what you're providing in regards to both your service and also your actual reports. I know that's easier said than done, it takes a lot of work, but from someone who's done that, I actually mapped the whole of the UK into regions and worked out exactly who was doing what, and then gained an average figure for all of those different areas. Then I could set my pricing structure to what I believe was a realistic amount, but based on what we are producing in regards to quality and service. So that is a definite key component of your thinking, certainly in the short and medium term, because what you set out initially will then need to feed in for the next 12 months, say 24 months, because if you're changing your pricing structure 2-3 months in after you've gained that client, they're not going to appreciate that, and you'll probably find that they won't work with you. So be realistic, take the time, set your structure correctly so that you know that certainly for the next 12 months, that's what you can rely on, that's what your clients can rely on. So self-employed and employed definitions. Briefly touch on this because it's quite a detailed area, but certainly from the Inland Revenue point of view, they deem being self-employed for tax purposes is someone who carries on a trade or business as sole proprietor or an independent contractor. You can be a membership of a partnership, or you're otherwise in business for yourself, including a part-time business. So you're a sole provider. You can have clerks working for you. I have, but they're all in self-employed as it stands at the moment. So I'm still defined as self-employed in some respects, but equally I'm also a company director. So effectively my company actually employs me. So you've got to be aware of exactly how you're going to set yourself up to how you are then going to be seen by tax people, because that does have a direct impact on what you can earn, what taxes you've got to pay, national insurance, potential pensions as well. So be aware of that. So, but certainly from a self-employed point of view, you're effectively a sole provider working on your own, working in business for yourself, and that can include a part-time business as well. So in regards to being an employee, the definition for that term is that you're basically, or you have basically a contract of employment. So you're carrying out work for another where you get agreed hours, agreed pay, agreed leave, agreed sick pay, agreed terms and conditions. And even though they don't necessarily have to be written down in writing, they can be an actual verbal agreement, although I really would stress get a written contract, because then expectations are set, everybody knows where they are, and if anybody doesn't meet those, either yourself or your employer, then you've got a route to go down in order to rectify that, to manage that issue. So always have it written down. And obviously as an employee, you're entitled to a wide range of employment rights, including things like, as I said, sick pay, maternity pay, you've got paternity pay, as well as training, things like provision of PPEs and equipment to do your job of work, etc. So there's quite a big difference between self-employed and employed. And that kind of goes back to the earlier slides in what I was saying in regards to what do you want out of a role. So if you're a sole employee, i.e. you're just a self-employed person doing your work, you've got to provide everything. So you've got to do all your taxes, all your HR, as it were, to a certain degree. You've got to provide all your equipment. You've got to provide all your processes and look after your health and safety, etc. Whereas if you're an employee working for a company, a lot of that is already provided for you or should be provided for you, even though things like health and safety, it's a joint effort in regards to you're both equally liable for your safety, but an employer has more responsibility. They've got to make sure they give you the right PPEs, give you the right equipment, give you the right training, etc. Whereas as a self-employed person, you're responsible for all of that. So again, that's why you've got to be aware, what is it you want from a role? What do you need from the role? What do you want from the role? What suits you and your personal circumstances best? So really do think about that when you're looking at this. So the advantages of being self-employed clerk, there are many, but these three I thought were the most poignant in regards to the fit around family commitments. It's a big draw, certainly, for a lot of clerks and companies that I know, especially working mums, working dads, or people with other responsibilities or other work that they want to carry out. And it means then that role can fit around what they need and what you need in order to be flexible in your time and use of your time. You've also got then the choice of working as part of a team or solo working. So a lot of self-employed one-man bands, for want of a better phrase, work on their own, so that's solo working, or they work as part of a team like my clerks do, where I've got self-employed clerks and they all work in the same kind of area. We meet up, we have tea, coffee, cakes and stuff like that, and talk to each other and catch up, etc. So we're kind of like part of the team, but they're also, most of the work is solo working, i.e. in the properties doing the work on a day-to-day basis. And again, this goes back down to also the flexible working. So each part of my clerk's role means that they can be flexible in what they want to do, because as self-employed, they have to have the ability to work when they want, without set hours, without restrictions, without contracts in regards to you've got to do X amount of work in X amount of time and you can't work with anybody else. That is illegal. The HMRC would look at you as employed rather than self-employed if you had those kind of restrictions with you. So the flexible working is not about just the fact of how many jobs you do, but also the work around that in regards to how you're given your work, whether you've got flexibility to turn it down, take it, when you can take leave or days off, or work weekends or not work weekends, or work afternoons or mornings, etc. So you've got loads of advantages in regards to flexible working. And certainly if you don't have that flexible working, if you've got a company or someone that you do work for but don't have a contract, but then they demand you at certain times, certain days for a certain amount of reports, and you are only given annual leave as and when they deem it, etc., then that's not self-employed, that's employed. So you need to be aware of that, because that sometimes can be an issue, and it's something that I'm certainly aware of with someone that I know that had that issue. So you need to be aware of what is required of you and where that flexibility comes, and make sure that it doesn't then go over to employed status. So there's some of the advantages of self-employed, but equally with that comes some disadvantages. Often you are working alone. I would say 95% of the time you're in the property working alone. Yes, you'll have interaction with potentially agents and landlords, etc., but essentially you're in that house doing that report on your own until it's complete, and then you're doing that day in, day out, depending on how many jobs you do. So for some, that's absolutely fine, not a problem at all. That's exactly how they like to work, that's great. Other people, not so much. So you've got to bear that in mind when you're thinking about, well, what do I want from this role? Also, the disadvantage of shouldering all the responsibilities. As a business owner, you're responsible for getting clients in, completing the work, the quality, making sure the clients are happy, making sure your clerks are happy, obviously dealing with tenants and dealing with other companies, having to supply the apps, the software, the hardware, etc. So there's a lot of stuff that you as a a sole provider or self-employed clerk have to manage. And what I do find, certainly in this business, is that most companies work in silos, they work on their own. There's not much interaction between ourselves. There is some information sharing, depending on what groups you're in and what areas you work, but in the main, you tend to be almost going it alone. And that can be quite difficult, especially if you've got things like a burning question that you need answering. You know, who do you turn to? Where do you go? How do you ask for information? How do you keep up with legislation, etc.? You know, so there's a lot there for you to deal with. And obviously, you know, obviously with that is the constant struggle to gain clients, where the industry itself is actually quite a saturated market. You only have to look in your local area to see how many agents there are, to how many inventory clerks there are, and that could be very big companies with employed clerks, could be smaller one-man band companies. Excuse me. And it can be a struggle to get your foot into that door, and certainly I found that when I started, that I found it quite difficult to get recognised, to get noticed, to get someone to look at the reports that we're providing and advantages of the reports that we were giving for the cost that we're charging. And it can be a real struggle. And if you don't get the work and you're not making the money, and you've still got all the responsibilities in regards to, you know, your day-to-day living costs, etc., you know, that can be a real struggle. So that can be a really big disadvantage for a lot of people thinking about becoming a clerk. So you've got to be sure, and going back to the earlier bullet points and slides, is thinking about, well, what's your cost base look like? What do you need to earn? What flexibility have you got in earning? Can you last 2, 3, 5, 6 months before you have to earn? Can you pay things like your mortgages, your utility bills, etc.? So if you've got that bit and you've got that nailed down and you've got that understanding, then if you're struggling to gain clients, then you know exactly how long you've got before it becomes an issue. So you've got your focus on that. So just be aware, it can be a real struggle. Not for everybody, not all the time. Certainly I found initially it took me a couple of months to really get my foot in the door. Once we got the foot in the door, once we got talking to agents, they started using their services, then we've not had a problem since. In fact, I've actually got a different problem in as much as we're actually having to turn work down because I don't have enough clerks to be able to complete the work. So we are effectively having to turn away work, which is never a good thing, but in a way, it's great because if we're doing that well, we're being noticed, then we're doing something right, and that's really great. But obviously, I'd like to do more. So, you know, the struggle isn't necessarily just always just gaining clients. There's also, you know, being able to take more on. So again, you need to factor these kind of things in as to how you want to structure your company, what you want to do, both in the medium and longer term. And with that comes income expectations. They vary greatly, I find, from area to area, region to region. In London, the prices you can charge there to what we can charge down here in Dorset, what you charge in Oxford, what you charge in Manchester, they differ constantly. And now we've got the tenant fee ban coming in. There is a huge pressure on agents to look elsewhere to cover the loss in fees, to keep their margins up, and often they're looking at suppliers. I don't agree with that because I think we as providers do a really difficult job. I don't think we're paid anywhere near as much as we should do for the quality of reporting that we provide. But I'm also realistic that in the current market of what we can actually charge. But you need to factor in what do those fees look like. So that's why, as I said earlier, you need to look at what your competitors are charging, kind of quality reports you're providing, your turnaround times, you know, where you've got to go to do those reports, how long is it going to take you. All that factors into how you set your fee structure, because then you've also got to take into account then what the agent wants out of the deal. Agents will often, and actually no, more often than not, want to take a percentage. They either maybe take 10%, 12% of the reporting fee, or they'll pay whatever fee you charge them, and then they'll upscale it to the landlord or to the, well, no, it'll be to the landlord because the tenant won't be paying it come 1st of June this year. So there's a huge pressure now on fees and what you can charge and what you should charge. I personally think right at this moment is no inventory company or clerk should be looking to reduce their fees. I think you should be standing your ground for the quality reports that you're providing. But what you do need to do is think about the service you're providing and making sure that it's the best that it can be, because there will always be someone else that will do it for far less than you, maybe not necessarily the quality that you provide, but unfortunately agents, landlords tend to just look at the pound figures as opposed to what the reports actually provide in regards to quality of evidence, how robust they are, how reliable they are. So, you know, there's a huge juggling act to be done, but I certainly think pre-tenant fee ban up to the 1st of June, as much as agents might want to see a reduction in fees so that they can then offset that against what they're going to lose, I would stay firm. And certainly from my personal point of view, I am staying firm. I know what we provide is good quality, robust, evidenced reports, and they justify and more than justify the current fee structure that we're charging. And if I can get away with charging more, I will do, because I think they're worth it, but I'm realistic as well. So just bear that in mind, that fees are going to be a huge subject for conversation and are a huge subject of conversation at the moment. But if you've done your research, if you know your area, you know what you're providing, you know what your level of service is going to be like, and you've set your fee structure, then you should stay firm and keep to that, and just prove to the agent, prove to the landlord, no, I can justify that because of what I can give you, what the service I'm providing, and also the protection, the safeguarding of your property, your assets that I'm providing by giving you a report you can rely on. So come to a deposit dispute, you know that that report will stand up, and that will stand up in both in the ADR process, the dispute resolution process, or, as will probably happen, when it goes to court, because the more the insurance-backed policies come into effect, then there's going to be a more likelihood of going to court. So I would just bear that in mind when you're setting your fee structure, thinking about that. Don't just look at what you think is a good amount to charge. Think about the ongoing issues, and also what happens if you have to go through that ADR process, or if you have to go to court. You know, make sure that those reports are the best that they can be, but charge accordingly, and don't be afraid of that. I know some agents will try and, you know, drill you down further, but I also find that if you stand firm and go, no, that's the price and that's what I'm going to give you, invariably they will come back to you. They might go away and charge other people, try other people. They might say, well, such and such ABC inventories are doing it for half that amount. Great, lovely, that's brilliant. Go with them, but I can guarantee you'll come back to me because of the quality report we are providing. And certainly with the tenant fee ban coming in, you really should be focusing on that, focusing on the quality of that report. So as much as I would like to give you a fee structure, and I, funny enough, when I first started out, I actually mapped the whole of the UK and got an average amount per property of the fee structure, so I understood what it looked like, and I also knew where I needed to set my fee, my own personal fee structure. But I also know it does change from area to area, so you've got to look at what's local, what you want to charge to what you're going to provide, and stick with that. So in regards to fees, in-house reporting is becoming a big topic of conversation. I've noticed in some of the forums, and also with some of the agents that I've spoken to, and also that I'm aware of. There's a lot of agents looking to recoup the lost fees and the tenant fee ban by taking in-house reporting. So they're looking to, further on from their interim or midterm inspections, do their own check-ins, do their own inventories, do their own checkouts. I personally, and I think, and I have said to my clients, I don't think that's a really good idea. I think it's a backward step, and I think it's going to cost more. And as you can see here on this slide, I've put some pointers out. So I believe it will increase the staff costs, because we all know that there are slumps in reporting numbers certain times during the year. So in summertime, it gets really, really busy, you need loads of people, and then either side of that time, at year end, year beginning, tends to drop off. And if you're paying full-time staff with nothing to do, that's a huge waste of money. Whereas if you outsource, if you use inventory providers, then you don't need to bear that cost, because obviously we factor that in because of the flexibility that we built into our own role. So we know that, we prepare for that, and we work with that. And also there's an inability for them to scale up during busy periods. So I know of one agent that they've got 2 clerks in-house. One of them tends to be off sick more than they are at work, and the other one only works 21 hours a week. And because of that, they're finding that their reports aren't getting done, and they haven't got an ability to scale up because they don't have the people on site to be able to do that. They don't have those people employed. So what they have to do now is look to outsource. Well, that's great as long as you've then got someone to outsource to, and an ability to outsource. But I'll come back on to that as a potential. I've got a potential option for agents and how they might manage that. Also, in-house reporting, because you're employing people full-time, you've got to cover your sick, you've got to cover your maternity, your holiday pay, as well as obviously managing the day-to-day bookings and appointments and property visits. So for however much you're paying for an in-house service, i.e., I don't know, you're paying £18,000 per year per person, you've got to put at least 20% on cost for that, and also take away 20% of their actual time, i.e. the Monday to Friday 9 to 5, take 20% away from that for things like maternity, holiday, training as well. Training is a huge thing. People don't often factor that in. As inventory providers, sole inventory providers, we're constantly training ourselves or looking for training, whereas if you're an in-house, you've got to provide that. So you've got to take those out. So when you're looking at a person as effective time, could they manage your 4 to 5, 10, 15 reports a day with such a small resource, taking out all of those non-effective time constraints and financial constraints? So if you're an agent thinking about in-house reporting, you need to factor that in. There's also the costs of providing support and software. You've got to cover costs, mileage, vehicle provision, insurance, mobile phones, tablets, tools, etc. So you've got to give the tools to those staff members to be actually be able to carry that out. Some companies have their own in-house software, but then they've got to pay for that. They've got to do the upkeep, be able to update the software as and when changes are made, or it needs more functionality. So then there's another cost there to get that brought up. You've got to actually then support that cost. Someone's got to maintain the system, make sure it's working, act as a go-to support if things like going right, etc. And then you said paying for the costs and mileage and a vehicle for doing that, even in regards to providing the physical vehicle or providing the money to offset the cost of that vehicle to that staff member. And then obviously provision of ongoing training. You've got to remain up to date with legislative requirements. You only have to look at the industry at the moment, how much we're having to deal with. It's huge, absolutely huge. I think I looked at a list the other day on one agent's website, and it's like 126 different laws that they have to adhere to. And now we've got tenant fee ban coming in. We've recently had, so 2015, we had the carbon and smoke alarm legislation requirements. You've now got the fitness for human habitation requirement come in, and that in itself is a huge body of work. Great from a point of view of an extra work stream for us as inventory providers to deal with, but if you're taking this in-house, you've got to manage all that. So that all goes back down to the fact that you need more staff to do that. And if you can't have those staff, or you can't afford them, or you can't increase them when you need them, then you're going to find you're going to get a backlog of work, and then you're going to have problems, as I know one agent is, in as much as the work isn't being done, and the landlords are now finding out and thinking, well, why am I paying all this management fee when you're not managing? So by taking this provision in-house, you're taking on a lot of responsibility, a lot of cost, a lot of issues, which if you outsource, You don't have any of that. You don't have to pay full-time wages, and if you haven't got the work, then you're not paying for someone to sit there and not do anything. You don't have to cover sick and maternity pay. You don't have to cover mileage and vehicle provisions and software provisions, because most most inventory providers, most clerks will come with all of that. That's already inbuilt in what they offer as a service. And also training, you know, again, we as providers will train ourselves. We'll go out, we'll find new work streams and make sure we're up to date with legislative changes so that we can be on top of our game of providing the service we want. And one of the key issues within in-house reporting is one of perceived bias and the lack of impartiality. All of the deposit schemes as it stands now say that it doesn't matter whether a landlord or inventory or sole inventory clerk do their report or an agent does their report, but they do say that they give more weight and more credence to a third-party provider than what they do for an in-house. And for an in-house, what they will ask for is more evidence. So they'll ask for even more than what a clerk will provide, because they've got to show that impartiality. They've got to show that they aren't just working for the landlord, that they are looking after the tenant as well, and they're making sure that the report is accurate and not biased towards the landlord or to whoever is the person that's effectively gaining that or having that financial gain from that property. So trying to find the word here, as far as agents are concerned, I know there's a huge draw to take in-house reporting, to bring those lost funds in from inventory clerks back into the business to recoup the cost of losing the tenant fee ban. They will, but then they'll increase all their costs in all the other areas. So to me, it doesn't make any sense. With self-employed inventory clerks, we've got all companies, we've got the flexibility, they've got the ability to upscale, they've got the ability to chop and change depending on the service need, and they don't have all the issues in regards to paying someone to do work when, or pay someone to be there and do work when there isn't any work to actually be done. So in-house reporting, I would argue, is not a great way to go. But again, as everything, it's an individual choice, but I think as long as you understand and know what those choices are, then you can then work with that. Excuse me, I'm just going to get a quick drink. So longer term prospect for clerks, for the industry. Oops, sorry, too far. For the clerks and the industry, I don't think we're going to find with the tenant fee ban as of the 1st of June that everything stops and no one wants inventory reports or check-ins or check-outs or interim inspections, etc. I think there is definite scope for more work for providers. I just think it's going to be a question of how that's going to be perceived by landlords and agents in regards to the impact of the tenant fee ban. But I think if you look to Scotland, if you look to the fact that in 2012 they went through this process, if you look at how many companies are operating in Scotland and are thriving, and I know of one that are doing extremely well, i.e. Pinstripe Inventories, and I'm sure they won't mind me mentioning them, but they're doing extremely well. They've got a mixture, I think, of employed and self-employed clerks. They cover a very big area in Scotland, and they've actually increased in regards to revenue and just the amount of reports they're carrying out. So I don't necessarily think that the tenant fee ban is going to impact us to the degree that some are concerned about, in regards to that landlords will just stop using inventories and agents will take everything in-house. I think it will be more of a case of they will look for inventory providers to be more flexible in how they work, and I think they're also going to be looking at the quality of the reports even more so, especially with the deposit schemes now coming in that are insurance backed, because insurance companies by their very nature, they want evidence. They want to be able to prove that they've done everything they can, that's how the property was at the beginning of the tenancy, and there's a checkout, and there's the difference, and there are the issues, and it's easy to then hold people to account, be it the tenant or the landlord, because it's never clear always exactly which one is actually liable. But I do think that the longer term prospects are actually quite positive, and I don't necessarily see a massive shift away from reports, especially again with the fitness for human habitation. There's a whole work stream there that needs to be explored and exploited, not in a negative way, but in as much as that it's there, landlords going to need to make sure that their properties are habitable. A lot of landlords are hands off. They don't even live in the area where their properties are. They're going to need someone to do that, but they're also going to need that impartiality, that keen eye to make sure that everything is covered, because there will be a time, and it won't be too long after its implementation, which I think is the 20th of March, so we're talking this month, where you'll see councils, you'll see trading standards looking at properties, and you also tenants going to companies to look to sue landlords for what they consider as inhabitable properties, and everything there is going to need to be evidenced. Now, if a landlord doesn't have a report, they can't evidence it. So from my point of view, there's a great opportunity, a great work stream there to be able to do that bit of work, increase what you do or what you provide as a service, so that you can basically say to an agent, no, I am worth what I'm charging, and this is why, and these are the reports, and this is why you can rely on them. So I think the longer term prospects are certainly good, and I'm not looking at them at all negatively. I'm quite excited about them, to be honest with you. So in regards to all the changes that are coming up, and understanding our role, whether you're a new clerk, whether you're someone who is already working in the industry, there's a lot in the industry that we need to be aware of. We don't necessarily need to know every single law, but we certainly need to understand the impacts and also where there's potential work opportunities within that. And training is a key part of that. Now, part of InventoryBase Academy, part of InventoryBase, if it is InventoryBase Academy, and InventoryBase Academy is a online training platform that has a whole range of information and guidance and pointers and understanding to help support and guide both new providers and existing providers through the process of carrying out a report, providing a robust and evidence report, and why you need to actually do that. And with that, obviously, comes InventoryBase, the app that helps you compile the report at the property. It's much quicker, it's much faster. It's so certainly from a time point of view, the time taken to compile the property from say 2-3 years ago is vastly different now. So for argument's sake, if a property takes an hour to do 2 years ago, now I could probably do it in about half an hour. So there's a time saving cost to using the app, but also with the support, with the guidance that both InventoryBase and InventoryBase Academy provide, and also the one-to-one support. Because one thing that I've always found in the industry, it's really, really difficult sometimes to ask someone that burning question, what do you call this, or how would you do that? So part of the academy, what we've tried to tackle is those kind of questions: why you're doing something, what you should look out for, why you go left or right, how you navigate a property, what do you call things, etc. So the training is there to help guide, help understand, but it's been written in a way so that it's very easy to understand, but it's useful. I've personally been on a couple of training courses where I've got loads of folders, loads of bumps, and got a certificate, etc. But I still came away none the wiser, not really with any tangible understanding, and probably in the main, near enough all my questions unanswered. And we want to tackle that. We want to be able to give inventory providers real support and realistic support, not just somewhere to ring or how do I do this? But go further, so like with the fitness for human habitation, for argument's sake, we've written the template into the template library for InventoryBase, which is going to be going out en masse shortly. So do look out for the emails and the press releases for that. But also how then to actually capture the information, what to consider. So there's going to be guidance tools there. There's going to be an understanding of what you need to consider, why you need to consider it, some example questions, some example answers. So you've got a better understanding of what is actually required of you. We've done the same with Legionella risk assessment. We've done the same with a myriad of other templates within the system. So the training is going to be a holistic training. It's not just about attending an online course and there you go, you've got a certificate. It's about an ongoing system that's constantly updated. As we know more, there's going to be more added to it, more understanding, more information, and obviously the ability to talk to us and also get training from us on a one-to-one basis. So there's loads of options out there for training rather than just maybe going to a 2-day weekend course. And we want to go further than that. We want to show you how to do things and then why you're doing those things, and also then support you whilst you're doing those, whilst you're completing those reports. And certainly in regards to the whole issue of evidence, my firm belief is that evidence is going to become absolutely crucial to our industry, to our reports, to what we provide. And if you're not getting the evidence right, you're going to struggle a little bit. And certainly if you've got other companies who are doing really well and providing that robust evidence and you're not, then you're going to be lagging behind. So the training, again, like I said, is holistic. It's not just a one course, off you go, thanks very much. It is so much more than that, and it's going to be constantly evolving as we understand more, as we know more, as you ask us more. So it's certainly worthwhile having a look at that and signing up, or at least talking to us about that. So future of the industry. Again, going back to the whole tenant fee ban, I know a lot of people are worried, agents worried, landlords are worried, etc. I'm not worried. I really am not. I'm not worried because I can see where we're going in regards to an industry and what's going to be required going forward. And I'm confident that if we provide the detailed, robust evidence reports that we should be providing to the highest quality that we can, we will not only cement our position with the industry in regards to becoming the go-to suppliers rather than going in-house, but we'll also shape the industry. And it's something that I've been talking about to whoever would be willing to listen to me, probably maybe to some annoyance, is that I get really aggrieved over the fact that we are not considered as an integral part of the lettings process. I know we're part of it, and I know that we are commissioned to do reports, etc., but we're never seen as someone who is highly regarded or needed. And I think half the problem with that is because inventories and checkout reports and interim inspections, etc., are not required by law. They're not written into the lettings process, into ASTs, etc. There's no actual lawful requirement for us to do that, and I find that really annoying, especially from being a tenant point of view, because if you're giving over vast amounts of your money to someone and then the report that is basically provided to you, especially once the tenant fee ban comes in, to say, that's condition of the property, that's the report that's going to be relied on when it comes to checkout. And if things aren't done properly or haven't been recorded correctly, and for whatever reason either the tenant hasn't appreciated it, hasn't written it, or hasn't written enough detail about it, they could be held liable. So that money then becomes a potential pot that landlords and agents can dip into, and the tenant's got no control over it. Equally, landlords, that pot of money is there to safeguard their assets, to safeguard that tenancy, so that they get the property back in reasonable, if not same condition or thereabouts at the end of the tenancy. And again, if that report isn't robust enough, then they can't rely on it. They don't then have the evidence to take that forward to maybe take that tenant to task and request monies as part of the ADR process, or in fact going to court in order to gain access to the deposit to, you know, get back monies that they've obviously lost through either damage, neglect, etc., etc. So I think certainly with the industry as it stands at the moment, I think there's huge potential for us to really step up, really get our voices heard, really get the industry to see us as a necessary and also required. I'm trying to think of the word for it. As a service that it is integral to the service that we provide. It's basically so that we're needed. I'm getting my words mixed up here. We're wanted, we're needed, but we can also justify a position in regards to how we provide the robust evidence and reporting, and that there is a real need for us to stand up and, like I said, get our voices heard and get us so that we become a required part of the lettings process. South Africa, for argument's sake, within their ASTs, within their legislative requirements, a report is required, but we don't have that here, and I think we should. And I think a lot of the reason we're not being heard is because we do work in silos. We tend to cover our own patches, you know, because obviously it's our work, our livelihood. We want to make sure that we keep that secure. But I think sometimes we do need to be heard as one voice, and there's not much of that going on at the moment. And I understand that. I really do understand that, because no one wants to have anybody encroach on their area, their patch, their work, because obviously fear of losing that. I get that. But I think if we can raise our standards and show that we can provide those robust reports, that we will then get a better voice in the industry, we'll get a better footing, get better fees, and we can provide a better service to the industry as a whole. So sorry if that's a bit rambling, but I could probably do a whole webinar just on that side of things. But I really get passionate about where we could potentially be, and I get a bit annoyed because I know we can get there. It's just we just got to get the impetus. We've got to get together. We've got to talk together. We've got to, you know, look and speak to the right people, to TDS and My Deposits and the like, and, you know, and talk to government and be part of that conversation, because I know there are some bigger companies that are kind of like part of that conversation, but not even them are in any way talking to any great degree, or be seen to be talking to any great degree, and I want us to be heard. So again, as part of InventoryBase Academy, InventoryBase itself, and the wider community, I think if we can all kind of talk together and get that voice heard, I think we can do great things with the industry, because we are just not clerks. We are so much more than that. We're a professional reporting stroke assessment service, and that's how we should be seen, and that's what that's how we should, you know, project ourselves. That's what we should be looking for us all to aim for, in my very humble opinion. So with that in mind, I'm very much aware I have been talking constantly. I'm aware of the time, and I can see there's loads of questions. Thank you so much. I think the best thing to do, let's finish off the webinar, and then we can get back to all the questions, and then everybody can see everybody else's questions and all the answers with them, but they will be anonymized, so don't worry about that. I understand the whole thing with the GDPR. So if you do want to know more, you can chat with me. So yep, that's me. Best picture. I don't normally like having pictures taken of me, so that's the best one I could find. You can contact me for an informal chat if you want questions about becoming a clerk, or if you are a clerk, how you see the industry going, what you want, even if you just want a general chat. Because again, I know from personal experience, sometimes you just want to talk to someone and just talk about, you know, how the industry is going, any issues you've got, looking for advice and guidance. That's what we're here for. That's what I'm here for. So you've got my contact details there. So Sean@inventorybase.com, and you've got a telephone number there. And if you're thinking about looking at your app provision, you can contact and visit InventoryBase at inventorybase.co.uk or /academy, so you can go both of those. And also you can email info@inventorybase.com, or again call the guys to either schedule a personal demo, or you can also sign up to a very unique workstream system that's about to be launched, which will look to bring inventory providers and also agent/landlords together much quicker, much better than we currently have. So do look out for your email shots. It's going to be an exciting time for the industry, exciting time for InventoryBase, certainly over the next few months. So it would be great for you to be on board with us, working with us, and looking forward to what I believe is a very exciting future. So with all that said, I really do thank you for your time, for your patience, for your ear, and I really do look forward to either talking to you or hearing from you, and for our next webinar. Look forward to speaking with you again soon. Thank you very much and have a great evening.